Well, welcome tonight to the Joe and Joe Weather Show. It's Joe Rayo to my left. I'm Joe Chaffee, and we're all glad that you're here on this Labor Day, on this utterly strange Labor Day, where we have a summer winter storm. Do you remember I cannot recall. I can't recall ever having widespread winter storm warnings up for uh, part of the country, in this case, the Northern and Central Rockies, to have winter storm warnings up and talking about it on Labor Day.
Meanwhile, California's burning up.
We have the California furnace. We had a record 100-degree temperature in downtown San Francisco. And for those of you who have never been to San Francisco, it's awfully hard to get the temperature in San Francisco to get above 80, let alone to get it up to over 100. But they nailed it today, and they actually broke the record at 11 o'clock this morning when the temperature got the old record I think was 92. So they just flew right by that one. And
It's
oh
amazing.
yes,
And I think a lot of people in San Francisco do not have air conditioning because
you
they
don't
say,
need it.
"What do we need it for? Every so often it'll get hot, but that'll last a day or two. We could put up with that. No air con." But this is crazy, Joe. Wow.
It is crazy. Here's another crazy thing that's happened today. So we got two named tropical storms today. Paulette, which was named at 11 o'clock. Rene, male version, that was named at 5 o'clock, which now means that, and we may very well have the S storm on the map before we get to at the end of the week or going into next weekend, this coming weekend. But we were through the letter R, so it's the fastest we've ever got to the letter P and the letter R. Uh, we beat the record was Hurricane Rita, and that was September 17th. So we nailed that by 10 days. But believe Joe, if we get let's assume we get the S storm. We have three names left before we go to the Greek alphabet, and we still have a good chunk of the month of September and the first part of October to get through, which is usually a fairly busy time.
This may be the year where we actually use up all the letters in the Greek alphabet.
You know the way it's going, and you look at what's happening out in the Atlantic. Everything is spinning. I mean, it's just everything is just spinning. So I wouldn't it wouldn't shock me at all if we get to the Greek alphabet before the month is over. It just wouldn't. There's plenty of time for that.
The way we're going, it may be another couple of more weeks before we get start an alpha, beta, and gamma.
Right. So, awesome gaming. Thank you for an early super chat hit tonight. Joe and I appreciate it. He says, "Wow, the West Coast got a lot of different kinds of warnings and watches out there today." Yeah, I mean, it really is just you go to the western half of the United States, and we'll show it to you on the watches and warnings map tonight. It is truly astounding. The whole the whole western half of the United States is just covered with one sort of warning or another. And of course, I think before we even talk about the tropical systems, I got to believe that I'm reading some of the forecasts coming out from the Colorado offices uh, because they're dealing with smoke from wildfires. So that's in the forecast as well. So you have forecasts that read rain tonight from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. Smoke tonight from 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. Rain and snow 1 a.m. until 9 a.m. on Tuesday. Snow from 9 a.m. Tuesday right into Tuesday night. It's just nuts. And all of that with 60 and 70-degree temperature drops, 40 to 50 mile an hour winds. And in all seriousness, there's going to be tree damage. There's going to be power lines down. There's going to be slick roads. You name it. This is just a very very I don't know, is chaotic too tame a word to use to describe what's happening?
I don't know. You could look in your thesaurus and try to find a bunch of words that will describe this, but it is absolutely amazing that. and so much weather happening in such a compressed area. I mean, it's only a stone's throw away from the extreme heat of California to the dropping temperatures and frigid cold and snow that'll be going on in parts of the Rockies. Uh, and meanwhile, here we're sitting pretty. We have had hardly anything to really be upset about. It turned out to be today was the final day of the holiday weekend, and I cannot remember a Labor Day holiday weekend quite as nice as this one.
Oh my God, it was perfect. Low humidity, sunshine. Yesterday and today for me didn't get out of the 70s. A few spots today got to 80 or so. I mean, really, it was just a spectacular 3-day weekend, not a drop of rain. And now we're going to move forward to whatever this week brings. The only thing missing from the forecasts are the outlook for locusts. And well, you almost have fire and brimstone because you do have the wildfires and you've got the smoke. But take a look, Joe, the watches and warnings map tonight is that every color imaginable is up in the western part of the United States. And then you've got winter storm warnings, uh, winter weather advisories in Wyoming and down through much of Colorado. In the west, it's all about excessive heat from the southwest all the way up into Northern California. You've got high wind, and we haven't really mentioned too much about the fact about the wind, but this is going to be a big deal in those areas that are getting the heavy snow, and even the areas that aren't getting the heavy snow. Wind is going to be a big deal. The gradient is very, very tight. You have a 1040 high to the north, and you've got a less than 1,000 millibar low somewhere down in the mid 990s that's going to develop out of this. So you're going to have a very large pressure change over a relatively short distance, plus the impact of all the mountains with uh, upslope and everything else. That wind's going to howl in a lot of spots.
Yes, as they call it, if you come from that area of the country, a good old Wyoming screamer, so to speak. and
Yes.
yes, indeed, the winds are going to be screaming depending upon what part of the Rockies you're going to be in for the next 24 hours.
So all of this is related, and I have the max temperatures that are up, and all of this is related. You're getting uh, an extreme event with a summer winter storm going on. You're going to have all this happening with respect to the hot weather that you're seeing out in the west because of how the upper air is set up in order to produce such an event. But these are the high temperatures today, and it's 4 o'clock on the west coast, so this is probably just about at the highs of the day. I mean, you have temperatures, as I said, San Francisco itself, which we don't have the plot on the map here, but San Francisco itself, I saw was did get to 100 in downtown San Francisco, as being mentioned. But look at these numbers just inland. Uh, Concord, Buchanan Field, 112, and they're off the high now. They're at 111.
Wow.
Livermore, 109. Fairfield Travis Air Force Base, 111. Uh, Further north in Santa Rosa, 111, 112. I mean, this is just crazy stuff. And even down the coast, St. Louis Obispo, 108. I mean, I've been to St. Louis Obispo. It's a nice little town, and it's not that far inland from the coast. So they're just burning up. Little cooler down around L.A. where it's only 90 at Bob Hope Airport. Chino Airport near Santa Anita is 97. Uh, so the temperatures down, at least in Southern California near the coast, aren't too shabby. 79 right now in San Diego, but you go inland in south into toward Palm Springs and beyond, you're seeing numbers, or at least you just saw numbers. There we go, 117 at Ford Dry Lake, and I imagine it is dry. 114 at Quartzville. 111 at Tiger Wash Fan. I love these town names. They're so interesting. I'm trying to get near Phoenix today, a cooler 106 in Phoenix. But again, look, these numbers are incredible with respect to the temperatures. And of course, the other thing is, Joe, just swing over to Colorado, where this is all happening ahead of the game. Colorado Springs, Pueblo today got to 94. Colorado Springs 90. Denver 93 for the 73rd time this year. Denver has hit 93, and that ties a record for most days in a summer season above 90. Fort Collins a little bit cooler, up at about 80. And then you start to go further north. Now, these are the highs up in Wyoming where temperatures have already been falling. You're seeing temperatures that topped out in the upper 60s to mid 70s, but those temperatures now have dropped. And I'm going to bring up the current map here.
Why would anybody want to live in California, though, Joe? I mean, I ask this question because in the wintertime, storms from the Pacific always come in, flood them out, mudslides, and all kinds of mayhem. In the summertime, extreme heat. We have the wildfires. On top of everything else, you have to worry about earthquakes. I mean, why would you want to move to that part of the country? I don't understand.
Well, they do get they do get a lot of sunny days.
Yeah, that kind of makes you forget when
Yes.
you're enjoying all of that,
Now I'm
right?
just looking at some of the temperatures. Wyoming temperatures have already fallen into the upper 30s and low 40s. It's still low 60s and actually even some 70s when you get to the southern part of the state. And of course, the cold air has not quite moved into Colorado yet. So, but the winds have shifted around to the north, and seeing some really strong wind gusts whipping around already. 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts, winds gusting 35 to 40. And I imagine they're going to see some gusts up to 50 miles an hour or more in some places before this is all said and done. And then further north into Montana, where the colder air, of course, the source regions up in Canada, that cold air coming down. You're seeing temperatures in the 20s and 30s, still some 40s around, but the process of those temperatures dropping off has certainly begun, and it's going to be some night up there for sure. Winter storm warnings, as we said, I just kind of centered right on the areas in Wyoming and Colorado that have winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories. And in terms of snowfall, and I got to find it, but I did put up, I got the Denver forecast office with their snowfall totals. Let me see if it's this next graphic. Yes, here it is, and then we'll come back to the other one. But they're going 2 to 7 in the Denver area. I got to think that your ranges are going to be wide because between the heat of the summer and the big changes, it's got to be awfully hard to forecast. It's hard enough to forecast snow amounts, but this has got to be extra hard considering what you're dealing with, and what you're coming from, and what you're going to. It's got to be hard to figure out how much snow you're going to get out of this.
It is. You know, we often in the month of March and April, when we get snow around here, we talk about the angle of the sun. We also talk about how warm the ground is or whatever. I mean, how do you? I 100 degrees, 90 degrees, and then 24 hours later, snow. What are you going
Who
to say about
you
that?
know say now? Um, A&M Weather asked me, mentioned about this that we obviously know that at this part of the country that temperature drops of this temperature changes of this sort of are not uncommon. But back on January 14th, 15th in 1972 is the standout here in Montana, and I looked it up just to get it correct. If you go on, on Google, on January 14th, 15th, 1972, the Weather Service Cooperative Observer Site, located in Loma, Montana, recorded 103 degree temperature change when it went from minus 54 Fahrenheit, minus 54, to plus 49 within 24 hours. And that broke the previous record of 100-degree temperature change that was set on January 23rd, 24th, 1916 in Browning, Montana. And, I also went to daily weather maps to just kind of get an idea of what in the name of God was happening here. But you had a cold, bitter cold high the day before, and a very deep upper trough in the western part of the United States. And part of it had already kind of swung around, and then a new trough was diving into the same spot. So the cold high pulls out, and as a result, you see where the stationary boundary is on the surface map on January 15th. Suddenly, the area that was in the bitter cold air is getting that warm Chinook wind. And then when the next trough went by, the cold air just kind of rushed back in. And one of the things they said that happened was that lots of broken windows as a result of the rapid temperature change.
Well, isn't that the Chinook wind
The
that they
Chinook,
have?
it's the Chinook wind.
Right.
The Chinook.
I've experienced that. I went to Montana for the total solar eclipse in February of 1979. We landed in Great Falls, Montana, and the temperature was 15 degrees below zero. And then the next day, the Chinook kicked in, and the temperature jumped up to into the 40s. And I said, "My God, what an incredible rise in temperature!" Yeah, I've often heard, and they also call it the snow eater wind because
Yes.
there was quite a bit of snow when we landed in Great Falls, and by the end of the following afternoon, a lot of that snow had melted because of the temperatures jumping. It is an amazing thing to experience those kind of conditions. But apparently, if you live out in the Rockies, this is, I mean, it's not commonplace. It's not something that happens every day. But
Right.
when it does, you're used to it. You're ready for it. Folks here in the East, we're not ready for something like that.
I got to think the 70-degree temperature changes to me as the standout. Oh, and because of the fact that we're still in early September,
Right.
the you know that's a big temperature change for this time of year. It just is. You know,
By the way, our mutual friend Pete Bergman, who's also a meteorologist, retired, sent me a message today saying that he actually went back over the records in Denver and he was able to find not a few cases where it has snowed in September. Now, here in New York, we have had a few cases where it snowed in October. That's amazing enough. But I guess when you're 5,200 plus feet above sea level, you can go back an extra month. And that's the fact is that they have had early snowfall in September, although I'm wondering or scratching my head whether or not
for Denver,
those
this
other
is
snowfalls have come off of a couple of days or several day stretch when it was in the 90s and hundreds.
right. For Denver, by the way, this is the third. This would be the third earliest. There have been two others that have been earlier than this,
Right.
both in the month of September. So this would be the third earliest, and not the earliest, but still. Uh, to me it might as well. It's close enough. I know close only matters in horseshoes, but I think we can make an exception in this particular case. Here's a snowfall forecast, by the way, from Montana, clear down through Colorado. You see the varying conditions, and of course, a lot of this depends on elevation. The areas about over 5,000 feet are going to get hit the hardest, but you do have a band of 1 foot plus snows that run down from north to south in Colorado, west of Denver, and points southward. That snow area extends down as far south as northern New Mexico, and even a few areas in Nebraska, western Nebraska, getting a couple of inches in spots, and westernmost Kansas may be seeing a little bit of snow out of this, and also back into parts of Utah. So this is going to go down for many of these areas as a storm a storm and a series of weather events to remember. The I got WPC's surface maps. I thought were pretty useful today to kind of show with the highs and lows and the isobars, and this is for 8 o'clock tonight in the area of snow in parts of Idaho and western Montana, and then as we go to 2 a.m. You see the high, a 1037 high, pushing into northwest Montana, and less than 1,000 millibar low on the Oklahoma panhandle there. So that gradient, a lot of isobars in between the low and the high. So you're going to have a pretty sizable wind. By tomorrow morning, that snow line pushes down through Colorado and continues to push southward during the day tomorrow as that cold high presses in. By tomorrow night, the cold high is in central Wyoming, east central Wyoming, ridged down into New Mexico. You've got heavy rains, by the way, that are going to develop across northern Texas, northwest Texas, most of Oklahoma, all of Kansas, parts of Nebraska, Iowa, and points to the northeast. And then even Wednesday morning, Joe, there's still snow going on before finally by we get to Wednesday night, things start to lighten up and it all comes to an end. But quite an event for sure. And I got the surface map on the latest GFS. Let me get that western view up, and we'll pull the upper air. I'm going to take the wide view of the upper air because I think this way at least we get to see, what with what's happening there and the result on our end of the world where it's pretty quiet. But you notice, folks, that trough is right swinging down. A very, very strong upper air trough. You have this huge upper high sitting off the Pacific Northwest coast that's pressed into the Canadian Northwest. And meanwhile, we're just kind of on the edge of this jet stream pattern here. You've got the Atlantic Ridge, so it's all very quiet in the eastern part of the United States. All the energy with that powerhouse trough that's digging down is all out in the west. You see that upper low just the European was trying to drop this down into Utah and Arizona. You know what? And it looked kind of silly last week when it did it, but it was correct here. And the GFS sort of caught up with it, and that upper low is just going to weaken and open up, and then eventually what's left of it comes eastward, and we'll see a cold front of some sort later this week, and again over the weekend another one. But you see how the upper air, folks, is reacting here. Just going back, I'll just run it backwards from the weekend, of course, and our nice weekend here, but then that upper trough drops down, strong upper low over James Bay. This is deep. I mean, this is really a very deep trough that drops down into the southwest, and then finishes it off as the upper low just separates, and then eventually just gets carried away on over into the eastern part of the United States. And with respect to the surface map here in the west, it's not often that we get to do this so early. So I guess we could say, Joe, this is good practice for when it's time for us to deal with winter storms. But here's what how the model shows it with all that snow in Colorado, the really tight gradient, the low that's down near El Paso, a 991 low there with a 1032 high up in Wyoming, and then eventually it all just gets kicked away and it's all over with. So. For the folks that are watching from there, your everything's getting underway now. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy couple of nights ahead.
It is. And as far as the cold front that you mentioned, Joe, the fact is that when we talked about this yesterday, it's being generated. This whole event is being generated by a positively tilted trough. In other words, a trough that is tilted more to the left, and like a pendulum will swing around, become kind of neutral, and then will swing toward the right, becoming negative. But the fact is that cold front is going to take its sweet time in making its way toward us. You would think that with some potent system like this, it would only take about a day or two for the front to race across the country and get here. But it doesn't look like that front's going to arrive until sometime mid or late Thursday with a few showers and storms. And then after that, we get into a drier airflow. And looks like Friday. And from this vantage point, from this forecaster's perspective right now, Joe, it looks like we're going to have a 50-50 weekend. Saturday most definitely looks like the better of the two weekend days. Sunday, as you just alluded to, another frontal disturbance will be approaching and could bring a few showers our way for Sunday and for the start of next week on Monday.
And if you look at the flow, by the way, we did actually have a cold front approach today into western New York and western Pennsylvania, but because the way the jet stream is set up and the tilt of this upper trough to the west, that front winds up just making it only so far east into westernmost New York and Pennsylvania, just basically falls apart there. So we really don't have any kind of frontal passage, as you said, until we can get this whole trough to just kind of start to swing to the east, and that's not going to happen until late Thursday. And in the meantime, we were kind of stuck right in this zone of dry air left over from the high. There's one thing I do want to just I just want to point out is there's a lot of disturbed weather that is developed in the southeast and off the coast of the southeast and out into the open waters of the Atlantic, and there is going to be, because we're going to have a high that is out south of Nova Scotia. We have, let me redraw this here. And I'll move this down so everybody can see. We are going to have our high is out near Nova Scotia. So we're basically going to have a flow that comes in from off the ocean. Pressures are low down here. There's going to be some kind of weak low that is going to develop there. And except for the Icon model, which tries to make this into a tropical depression or maybe even a weak tropical storm, the other models show lower pressures, but they don't really do anything with it. The one thing I would be somewhat concerned with is if some of this moisture were to kind of back into the coast and then maybe sneak in along coastal areas here sometime late Wednesday night or early Thursday. That would, to me, would be the one, the one thing I would just keep in the back of my mind. Otherwise, the week would be relatively uneventful until the next front goes by. And by the way, take a look. Take a look in the lower left, Joe. With those wildfires. You notice the color here of the cloud cover. It's a color you don't often see. This has got to be some of the wildfire smoke.
I'm trying. I see what looks like the smoke, Joe. Is that like a brownish?
Yeah. Can you check? Can you pull up that site that you go to that shows the that shows the wildfire the smoke coverage on your side to see if you can confirm that, because that's a
don't. By the way, it's on my AOL book. It's on an AOL bookmark. So
Welcome.
Yes.
Yes. All right.
That's your way. That's your way of that's your version of Me TV, doing a little nostalgia, meteorological TV nostalgia.
All right.
But that looks on the satellite to me like that might be the smoke for some of the wildfires, because that's an odd color, an odd shading of some kind.
Well, I can tell you, I'm looking at it right now. I could, if you want me to say, do you have it bookmarked where you are?
I don't have it bookmarked, but if you look at the loop that I have and look at what the coverage they have, and just see if it matches or not.
Yeah, it indeed matches. In fact, it's got smoke across the western 2/3 of the United. It has smoke all the way as far east, believe it or not, as the Ohio-Pennsylvania border.
So it's actually gotten entrained into that jet stream pattern and into that upper trough of that jet stream, that strong flow along the border states, and all that smoke is blowing on out to the northeast.
They also have a fair amount now on this map. Also, as you probably have seen it before, Joe, red dots, which are indicative of local forest fire or wildfire activity. But there's a fair amount of that also taking place over Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, all the way down to parts of Louisiana and Mississippi.
So that's got to be that's got to be all this stuff here on the satellite. Yeah, that's what it is. So you have you have a lot of interesting things here happening on the satellite. These Ghost 16 multicolor views are just amazing, what they pick up. So considering
I just put up on the chat. Oh no, it's not. Sorry about that. No, I thought I made I thought I took the URL and made a copy of it, but I didn't. But
all right, so I'm gonna load the Tropical Atlantic satellite loop, and we'll come back to it. I'll let it set up with all the extra frames that I like to put on, and then we'll come back to this a bit later, because obviously the tropics are spinning and we need to talk about it. Radar tonight showing some showers, and these showers and storms in western New York and western Pennsylvania have been weakening all day. There's a band that runs from Pittsburgh northeastward to just west of Williamsport, but that's all going to fall apart. The storms have been strong across much of Ohio today. Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, down to Georgia, all across the Gulf states, relatively quiet. We've got scattered storms running around over the state of Florida, and that's part of all that moisture that's off the southeast. A little bit of action in Texas, and then we've got rain in northern Wisconsin, back through Minnesota and the Dakotas, and now, of course, when you look at the beginnings of the radar, by the way, it's 7:32 Eastern time, so p.m. Eastern time. So if you're watching this on a replay, obviously the radars are dated. So do go to weather.gov and your local National Weather Service office to see what's happening. And you've got rain and probably some snow in the mix now going on in Montana on the radar. And let's just really quick, let me bring up SPC just to take care of severe weather risk. And it's just a narrow marginal risk that's being indicated from northern Missouri through Ohio, and that's part of those storms that you already saw. There's no severe weather risk being indicated for the next 2 days. So here we are in the east. There's our high that's out over east of Newfoundland, actually. The lower pressures that are off into the southeast. There's a stationary frontal boundary off the southeast coast. And then here we go out in the plains and the Rockies. You see that cold front swinging down, the low in northeastern Colorado, the big high up in Canada, and the cold air that's coming down with it. And that is all setting up our our situation out in the west. The WPC rainfall forecast map for the next 7 days. This is back end loaded for us here in the Northeast, so really not too much is going to be happening until late in the week and the weekend. They're looking at, Joe, 3/4 of an inch to 1.25 inches. Some heavier precip in the Carolinas, and that's of course with that all that moisture and the low pressure or whatever it is, that's whatever it winds up being off the southeast coast. And then you've got big rains up from Texas right up through the Central Plains and into the upper Mississippi Valley as a result of not only this system, but systems that will follow. Busy, 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 busy. Aren't we just busy?
And I'm just jumping ahead to the tropics, Joe, and I'm looking at the 12Z GFS run at forecast hour 240. This is 10 days out.
Right.
And I'm just shaking my head because I don't think I've ever seen anything like this before. The depiction in the tropical Atlantic has what, in essence, is an equilateral triangle with each angle formed by a tropical cyclone.
All right.
At the same time that that's happening, right along the immediate eastern seaboard, along the Carolina coastline, is yet a fourth system, which I'm assuming could also be tropical.
Right. Everything is spinning. Now here's the thing, and I'm glad you said this. We'll bring up the satellites and everything. I had the upper air for the Atlantic, but this is something at least I want to make a point about with regards to the tropical systems that are out there, and the models and what we're seeing from run to run. And I would just point out that. There's way too much happening, okay? There literally are so many things turning out there that that weather models are having an enormously difficult time trying to figure out how these systems are all going to interact with each other. So I would be very careful about coming to conclusions about what is or isn't going to happen based on any one individual run. Now you mentioned the 12Z run. Okay, I'm going to show the 18Z when it comes time. But while we're waiting for that, take a look at the 18Z and just kind of compare. Just compare for similar time frames the differences, because if these storms are so close, these systems are so close together that on some runs they interact in very strange ways, and I just think that at least from the standpoint of trying to figure out how this is all going to wind up, the best thing you could say is that they could all wind up just being fish storms. But in terms of being conclusive about that, I would that's something I wouldn't be able to do. Just looking at it, it's just nuts from run to run.
Well, I'm on the 18Z. I just decided I would advance everything forward as far as it can go because it's only coming out now. That run is coming out, and presumably the system that is designated as Paulette is going to come. It's not going to hit the according to looking at this piece of guidance,
right.
Not a forecast. It's guidance.
Right.
It's guiding us at 210 hours. It comes within a few hundred miles of the Cape Hatteras coastline before swirling out away from the Atlantic seaboard.
And that, by the way, is a good 10 degrees left of what the 5 to 10 degrees left of what the 12Z did. Okay. The European has I was looking at the European ensembles, which looks like it tried to take whatever represented Paulette. Had the arrow, you would put the arrow pointed to the southeast coast of the United States. Again, I don't think you can come to any conclusion. I don't care how good any model is. There's just, if you look at the satellite loop, which I have up here now, folks, and you particularly look out in the Atlantic east of 60 degrees, which is east of the Leeward and Windward Islands and all across the tropical Atlantic. Everything is turning, and Paulette is the one that is obvious there, the lead one. If you look toward the African coast, you have the new tropical storm from this evening, Rene. They're not that far apart, actually. I mean, they're not close, but they're not that far apart. Uh, they're about 1,100 miles apart. There's also, if you can also see inland in Africa a big bright white blob. That is going to be another tropical wave that was going to emerge off the coast probably sometime Wednesday night or early Thursday, and that
Well,
is
that's
likely to
Sally.
develop. That
That's
that would be the S storm.
Sally.
And also, Joe, this, by the way, this assumes that nothing happens with whatever's off the southeast coast, which, if you believe the icon, that would be Sally, and the next and the one off the African coast, if that develops, would be Teddy.
Yeah,
That sounds like it could be, it's like Harry and Sally. This will be Teddy and Sally.
that's right.
But this is by the time this week is out, we could possibly, or this weekend, this coming weekend, we could very well have 3 or 4 of these spinning around all at once. That's going to be
I,
just crazy to follow.
I love on the 12Z run of the GFS watching Rene, and Rene kind of diddle daddles out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and all of a sudden it gets caught in the upper level stream and zooms right, just barely. It's going to pass just either north of Portugal and maybe make landfall in western sections of France by about the
It's just
23rd.
crazy. So here's the 18Z, and we look, folks. Those you folks watching, you can look for yourselves if you go to tropicaltidbits.com and just go back on any of the models, but use the GFS and use the North Atlantic region view, and just look at the differences of every run and how these storms interact with each other. Sometimes one absorbs the other. There were a couple of them where Rene becomes the bigger storm and absorbs Paulette. There's a couple of them that have Paulette absorbing Rene. Some of them kept them separate. One rotated around. I mean, it's just crazy stuff. But here we have today's the latest run, and you can see here by Friday night, you've got Paulette northeast of the leewards. Rene is sitting roughly about 20 degrees 60, about 1,100 miles to the east of that. You go south of the Cabo Verde Islands, there's 1,007 low. That's probably Sally. And of course, again, that assumes that nothing happens off the southeast coast. On this particular run, Rene stays separate and then goes eastward, while Paulette gets under a little bit of an upper ridge and gets to push almost to 70 degrees, actually goes inside 70 degrees west before it turns northward and then turns eastward. And then, of course, Sally right behind that starts to turn northward before it gets to the Leeward Islands and moves up. But I guarantee you that we're still so early in the game here that we're going to wind up seeing the next runs do totally different things. So I can't really add too much wisdom to all of this. And if you look at the other problem, Joe, is the fact that unlike what we saw most of the summer, and just rolling back on this upper air, I'm going to go back to 72 hours ago. You still had some semblance of this, kind of east-west ridge across the Atlantic that has been the dominating feature for the last 7 or so weeks. But as we go forward, it changes a little bit. There are some weaknesses do develop in that ridge. And then there's some kind of cutoff low south of the Azores that forms as well. So this makes forecasting this a little trickier. Later this week, we do have a strong upper high off the mid-Atlantic coast, and then that starts to weaken a little bit. Then late in the period, it reappears, and you see here by Sunday, that upper ridge is, just a very narrow upper ridge over the top that sort of cradles Paulette. That's Rene. This is the new one that might come off the African coast. And meanwhile, we've got a shortwave trough here that's swinging through the Great Lakes. And that is, at least on this particular run, that shortwave trough opens up a door for Paulette to recurve and move out to the northeast. I mean, but that's right now. The next run may do something totally different, and there's an even deeper trough that approaches around the 18th, 19th, and 20th with an even stronger cold front, which would argue, if this is the case, that anything that's out there is going to stay out there. But I'm Switzerland right now. I'm not sure this is all going to play out the way the models are having it at this particular run.
Well, we just got to play it by. It seems like this weekend will be somewhat or semi-active, especially later on in the week. But next week, if you believe any of these models, any of these outlooks beyond, let's say, 7 days, it's going to be pretty wild. I saw one GFS run for around the 18th or 19th September. Not one, not two, but four tropical cyclones all the way from the Atlantic seaboard to the coast of Africa, stretched out. I mean, it's crazy.
I'm just seeing here at the end of the period. At the end of the period on the new GFS, things do finally start to calm down as these storms get out of the way. Again, assuming that this is how it's going to play out, and I will maintain that when we're on tomorrow night, we're going to have a whole different scenario of possibilities that are going to be on the table. Paulette, I'm sorry, at the 5 o'clock advisory is at 17.5 and 42.4. The Hurricane Center leaves it. It's only moving northwest at 3. Top winds are 40 miles an hour. And you can see that the Hurricane Center leaves us as a tropical storm through its 5-day forecast period because there are some wind shear issues out there. How they materialize remains to be seen. Meanwhile, Rene, they're still forecasting this to become a hurricane by Thursday morning. And Rene is at 16.1 and 22.3. It's probably going to move pretty much over the Cabo Verde Islands where they have tropical storm warnings up. Then from there, it just moves west and then west, northwest, and northwest. It's actually already moving north-northwest at 45 west by the time we get to Saturday. So it seems like of the ones that are out there right now, I think Rene is going to probably have the better chance of recurving early than Paulette does. If Paulette stays weak, it may wind up getting further west, and that may be one of the keys to all of this, Joe, is how strong these get. Because if they remain weak systems, they're going to be dictated more by the lower level flow than the upper level flow, and that might be one of the reasons why Paulette on this particular run gets further west, because it stays relatively weak and doesn't become a hurricane until it's well west of 60 degrees west. So we'll see if that winds up being correct. And of course, you see the hatched yellow area from the 2 o'clock tropical weather outlook. Do they have the 8 o'clock up yet? Yes, they do. 60% now on the. Oh, here's a new change. A 60% probability of the system coming off the African coast Wednesday night or Thursday. However, the one off the southeast coast now is in orange, and they said they're saying that gradual development of the system is possible over the next few days, and they now have a medium chance of 40% possibility of the lower pressures that are going to be off the southeast coast out to Bermuda as it heads west-northwest toward the Carolinas, a 40% chance of this becoming a tropical cyclone over the next several days. So they're watching too.
And that high is going to be coming on down for the end of the week into the start of the weekend looks nice. I'm looking at 10 days from now on the European. This is the operational European, and they have another.
All right, let me bring it up. Hang on. Go ahead.
And on at 240 hours, they have a nice packed area of rather coolish air that's working its way through Hudson Bay, James Bay. At the same time that they have that trying to push on down, they have what I think is Paulette somewhere south and east of Nova Scotia. Again, that's 10 days. That's 10 days from now. So
let's see. Let me see, because it's a little. Here's the European. Well, Paulette is on 168 hours is east southeast of Bermuda. There's actually four of them. this,
Yeah, I don't know which one that is.
all right, so let's
was guessing it
backtrack.
might be
Okay,
Paulette.
so all right, so here we are tomorrow morning. So Rene is the one on the Cabo Verdes. Paulette is the 1,002 low. That's halfway across, and then you can see there's a closed isobar. I'm going to do the model a favor. So that's the low that the Hurricane Center just mentioned. Okay. And it just sort of loses it. It never really does anything with it. So so Paulette is, yeah, Paulette is the one that's southeast of Nova Scotia and it passes east of Bermuda.
Right, right.
Okay. So, so Sally, well, this is, yeah. There's Sally is the one. There's two lows now, one east of the Cabo Verdes and one west of the Cabo Verdes. That one, the one that's west of the Cabo Verdes, moves over the northern leewards. The one that's behind it, another one that's behind it, comes off, and that goes northwest. And I was look, it's just so weird, bizarre, Joe. It really is. Look at this mess. Here we are next Thursday, 10 days. Look at this. This is a mess. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hey, there's your Greek alphabet if this winds up happening. We'll be at alpha.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, it's just nuts. It's just nuts. So before it gets even crazier,
And
let's
need crypto on the chat board says, why can't you guys just solve it like Columbo? Just that I put it in there. You guys
But you know why? I'll tell you why. Because in Columbo, you knew who the murderer was at the beginning because they always showed you who committed the crime. Columbo, the Columbo was about not figuring out who the murderer is, but it was about watching him solve it. You knew who the killer was.
He would walk out the door and then he'd come back and, one more question, sir.
Right. My wife and I. Or if there was, if it was an episode where the person is an actor playing an actor and they're the murderer.
Yeah.
My wife and I watch your show all the time. And he never did smoke that cigar.
Really, that's right.
He was never. It was always almost always unlit. Steve Lapointe just hammered super chat on this Labor Day. Thank you, Stephen. Joe and I really appreciate it greatly. And for those of you who've joined late, hopefully your Labor Day holiday was a good one, as ours was. And hope your forecast challenges are not quite as difficult as what we're having to try to figure out here.
Oh, it's going to be a fun couple of weeks, I predict, Joe.
No question. No question. So, see if I got anything. The chairman's on vacation. So he was down, and what a weekend for him to go down to southern New Jersey because the weather's been just absolutely beautiful.
It's wonderful
for the weekend. And wonderful. I don't have anything for today. And we went through all the Batman stuff yesterday, which was a lot of fun. Yeah. So that was a good thing. So I don't know. I guess we've covered so much weather tonight. I've sort of run out of gas.
And on a holiday, and right now, at least I'm seeing here on my chat on my screen, 142 people. We started streaming 48 minutes ago.
Yes.
I think I agree with you. We've gone just through everything.
We've covered it all. Yep. So tomorrow night, join us of where we will try to unravel this mystery of what is going to be happening with all these tropical systems spinning around, if anything happens out of that. And of course, we'll be bringing you the latest on the hashtag summer winter storm that is going on in the Rockies, and that furnace of a heat wave. And in all seriousness, I mean, that heat wave is very problematic because now they're having to do rolling power outages in order to conserve power. It's very, very difficult. The extreme weather conditions that we're seeing out in the western half of the United States we're trying to, as weather as weather geeks, we look at this stuff and we're amazed by it. We're awed by the power of nature, but we also recognize the fact that all of this impacts people's lives in a very big way. So we're not cheerleaders
No.
of this stuff. So
I-
don't misunderstand where we're coming from here.
And a lot of people think we are cheerleaders. Maybe when when we're just coming out of college and just starting, we got really excited and we're rooting for hurricanes or big snowstorm. But we have been in the business now for a good long time, far longer than I care to even dwell upon, and we don't root anymore for potential disasters to come. We hope that if they do move in, they move out very, very quickly. And we have had our fair share here in the east. Right now, it's the west turn, and we wish them all the best, be it snow, wind, heat, dust, smoke, whatever, because that's where all the action is right now.
Robert Russo just filled the coffee cup for us, Joe, by hitting super chat. Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much. Very generous of you to do. And again, also thank you to Awesome Gaming and Steve Lapointe for hitting super chat tonight, Joe, and I very much appreciate it. So we'll see you tomorrow night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Don't forget that this show is also available as a podcast. In case you can't watch it, you could always listen to it. Plug in your earbuds and ignore everybody else, and you can listen to the Joe and Joe Weather Show, and also Weather in 5, which I do in the mornings. This way you can get a quick update on the weather, and I try to keep it under 5 minutes, but I seldom succeed. I really should have just called it Weather in 7, in which case I would have wound up going 9 minutes. But so it doesn't matter how much time I give to it. I'll always wind up being about 2 minutes over.
One last comment from the chat board from Steve S. He says, all of this spinning reminds me of the guy on Ed Sullivan's spinning plates.
Who was that? Who was that? I mean, I remember the guy who did it. Who was he?
I don't remember what the
He would
guy's
spin
name was.
those baskets and the
I
plates
do
all the
remember
time.
the music that he had when he was doing it. Don't laugh. We may be playing that music before the next 2 weeks are out.
You got that right. All right, folks. Have a great night. Thanks for being here. 7 o'clock Eastern Time tomorrow on the Joe and Joe Weather Show.